Stock targets.
Yes, hello everyone. This is Sean Kelly at Stock Targets talking about peak oil. We are February 2013. Peak oil is a point in time after which production capacity is no longer able to grow and production actually comes down. Have we now peaked in oil production worldwide? And also, where is the price of oil going from now and forward? Okay, a few stats first. Peak oil is perhaps around the corner. World production in barrels of oil per day has reached 83.7 million barrels per day. In 2011, I'm excited to get to 2012 figures, which, in my opinion, will not be very much higher than last year, if not perhaps even lower. There is no big secret on peak oil. When is the world oil production going to peak? Conventional oil has already peaked in 2005, that we know. Conventional oil being the kind of oil which gushes out of a well and is ready to go straight to the refinery, what we have known for the last 150 years or so. Over the last 10-15 years has been developing an industry around unconventional oil, which is tar sands, tight oil, shale oil, NGLs, and so forth. The blue line, dotted line, indicates the decrease in production of conventional oil. It has been replaced to a certain portion by what you see in gray on the chart, tar sands mainly, and a few other types of oils in development. I have broken down the production of oil in countries which have peaked and countries which have not peaked. As surprising as it seems, 102 countries have already peaked their oil production. 12 countries have not yet peaked their oil production. In blue, the chart, the aggregate of those 101 countries going quasi-flat over 10 years, and that's really a big aggregate. In green, the countries which have not peaked, still showing a slight increase in production. Again, a few of them are close to peaking, but we'll discover that in a future description. As I said previously, the production in conventional oil has been decreasing worldwide since 2005, so that's now 7 good years. And this decrease is quite predictable. It's going to go further. We are not finding any major conventional oil fields. Here you have a graph of how the future is looking for the USA regarding unconventional oil production. There are only just a few countries which claim or can claim to have unconventional oils. But let's look at the chart first. Currently producing fields, conventional oil is the dark blue line. That is coming down, has been coming down since 1971. Quite predictable as to where it's going. It will be heading further south. In purple, the NGLs, natural gas liquids, a business which is working quite well, but again, the resource is not infinite. That will be still increasing for the next 10 years, and also a tendency to come downward. In yellow, other unconventional oils. In red, what you call light, tight oil. In other words, the oil which is trapped in rock, and that is mainly what we see in the Bakken in the USA, which is presently booming. According to the following chart, we should have a quite nice increase in total oil production in the US, going back up to 11 million barrels a day, perhaps more, perhaps 12. This in a 10-year time frame, which should bring the North American oil production, or actually just the US oil production, close to its levels of 1971. The chart is in fact quite optimistic. We can imagine that the light tight oil will be producing as indicated, but what is always surprising is the light blue wedge which you find on the right hand side of the chart. Fields yet to be found. So before you can extract any oil, you first have to find it. It's not a field yet to be developed, but making a forecast on what could be found in the future is quite an optimistic statement. The scenario on unconventional oils for the future is quite predictable. We have 4 large tight oil fields in North America: the Bakken, Niobrara, Barnett, and Eagle Ford. The rest of the world has barely any tight oil reserves besides Syria, China, Estonia, West Siberia, Australia, and Mexico. If you take in consideration typically what has happened in Estonia over the last 50 years, they have been pulling out shale oil from their shale, but it has been loss-making since. It's constantly being subsidized by the Estonian government. Imagine oil trapped in rock. You have to first get rid of the rock before you get a hold of the oil. That means a long and costly process. I give a 50% chance of the North American scenario happening as described on the previous chart, and I give a probability of 0% that the rest of the world will be unpeaking from a peak of oil, just due to the lack of resources and the physical incapability of pulling that kind of oil out of the ground faster. Here is the price of oil, coming from $130 a barrel back in early 2008. We're now back up to quite high levels, where you see that the WTI is trading around $95, and the North Sea Brent and the Dubai oil price are pretty much around the $110 level. Prices are coming up, and they are actually worldwide higher than what one would think, because everybody is just looking at the WTI price. The target price I see personally is going to be around north of $110 for a barrel of oil for the duration of 2013, and I see a spike during the year hitting 135. A little bit of guesswork, but the trend is there. Oil is becoming more and more scarce, and the world population is growing, and the demand for oil is skyrocketing. All those elements indicate that prices are going to go higher. Higher oil price means more deficits for oil importing countries, further economic slowdown. Growth rates of our economies are going to be nearing zero. Don't count too much on any big growth and on any big capacity to pay back the huge debt we have accumulated. Potential inflation. The economy has already been fueled by a whole lot of cash through QE 1, 2, 3 and QE perpetual. That's a mere definition of inflation. More unemployment. I don't see anything particular on that side. Slowdown does not create employment, it rather increases unemployment. I see more bankruptcies. I might see, even in some cases, the possibility of minor oil and gas shortages at the gas stations. Now, for the sake of a few stats on oil, 102 countries have peaked their oil production. That includes the United States. The last 10 years have been flat in terms of production. And the USA has had a resurgence over the last 3 years, which sort of increase or improve this chart a little bit. The countries having peaked could actually indicate slightly downwards. I like to add that within the blue chart is not included Saudi Arabia, which the green line indicates the production of countries which have not peaked, and those are just 12, Saudi Arabia being the largest one. And those countries are, again, in some cases showing signs of having peaked. I personally believe that Saudi Arabia is at the maximum of its production capacity, and that we're not to expect a whole lot in terms of increase coming from Saudi Arabia. Here a chart of what is happening in different particular entities. Again, 101 countries have peaked. OPEC is close to peaking. The 14 OPEC countries have a production which is flattish over the last 8 years. The USA plus Canada, which is the green line, we see a peak around 1973 if you add the two countries, and then a resurgence again between 2008 and up until 2012, where we have an increase which is quite significant from a chart point of view. We'll have to see how far this goes, but it's mainly based upon tight oil, shale oil, and tar sands. Here you have the chart of the 6 largest countries having not peaked their production. Saudi Arabia, even though we are flattish, we haven't peaked yet. China going up, and nevertheless China is not an export country. Then we have Canada doing fine and exporting well. Cannot blame the Canadians for that. The UAE in orange headed north, Brazil headed north, plus we have the offshore capability of Brazil coming online in the next 10 years, so we cannot really make a statement saying that they have peaked. Then Kazakhstan, also a big, the big Kashgan oil field coming online as we speak in 2013. On this chart, and keeping the same scale, we have 6 further countries which have not peaked. All the other 101 countries have peaked. That includes Libya, that includes Iran, that includes a host of countries including Kuwait. Qatar still moving north, Colombia moving north, Thailand is not an export country, India has not peaked but they're not an export country, and then Republic of Congo and Turkmenistan, which also are quite recent oil producers and therefore have not yet peaked. But this is a total of what you will find in terms of oil production out there which has not peaked. On this chart you have the countries which actually are the largest oil producing countries but which have all peaked. Let's look at the first line, which is the light green line. That is the USA. USA peaked in 1972, actually 1970, sorry. In the red box, the rebirth of oil production in the US thanks to the production in North Dakota. In red, the oil production by the Russian Federation. The peak was for them in 1987, before the fall of the Berlin Wall. They're back up to relatively high levels, but as they say, they still need a 20% increase in production to actually make sure that they are past their peak of 1987, and they say they can do that, but they will need an investment, a total investment of close to $1 trillion to be able to do that. In dark blue, Iran was producing 6 million barrels a day in the early 70s under the Shah. Then all that dropped and Iran never came back to the previous levels, and now again we're starting to see a drop in 2012. The black line, Norway, peaked in 2001. The UK in green peaked in 1999, and both these countries are down 30 to 50% from their peak within the last 10 to 15 years. Libya has peaked its production in 1970, also has been going sideways. We see a dip in 2011, but that's quite relevant. That was the revolution in Libya in 2012. Production should come back to its previous levels, but by far not at the level of its production of 1970. Now let's speak a bit about the people who see the world not peaking, or some others seeing the world unpeaking, in other words, reverting the peak it could have. First of all, those who think that the world is not peaking are firmly counting on Saudi Arabia, Canada, the UAE, and Kazakhstan to supply us. Also, that means that these people count on China and Brazil. Even though these countries are not oil exporters, they use their production entirely for their own consumption. Also, this means that the USA will be increasing its production by 40%, which is possible but still quite unlikely. This also means that Venezuela will increase its production by 30%, but that is quite unlikely. Those who believe that we're not peaking in terms of world oil production also are saying that shale oil is something really easy to obtain and cheap to pull out of the ground. But what they don't see is that it's expensive and it's very slow. If we want to make a forecast on how the world looks in terms of tar sand extraction, well, there are two spots in the world where you can find tar sands. That is Canada and Venezuela. No other real big tar sand find has been discovered anyplace. So claiming that the world cannot peak in production very soon means that you're unaware that conventional oil has peaked in 2005, as the numbers indicate. So I would look at that carefully and actually discover that conventional oil is down approximately 5% from its peak in 2005, which is practically a decrease in production of almost 1% per annum worldwide. Also, the common idea which you find out there among peak oil skeptics is that engineers will find a solution because that's their job. Indeed, their job is to find solution, but I have not seen yet engineers who can invent energy. They know how to transform it, but invent it hasn't happened yet. So now back to our conclusions for peak oil in February 2013. The world oil is peaking right now, as we can include all different types of oil in the statistic. conventional oil has peaked in 2005. Also, we believe that the oil price will be heading for an average over the year around $110. We also believe that the oil price will be spiking up to 135. So be prepared, adjust your portfolio accordingly, and start preparing for a quite difficult 2013.
Stock targets.